Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the distinguished lecture series of the Council for Strategic Affairs. Today is Saturday, February 24th, 2024, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we have a distinguished lecture by Major General Asthana on Ukraine-Russia war, 2 years and beyond. My name is Dr. Adityanjee, and I am the President of Council for Strategic Affairs. Before we actually start, a little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. The Council imparts education in the field of international relations. We foster discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. Council encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. We encourage publication of articles on geopolitics. CSA condemns terrorism in all its forms worldwide, and we aim to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. We have a roundtable discussion, generally on second Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Daytime. We have a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of each month at 10 a.m., just like we are having today. We also have a one-on-one interview series called Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee. We organize symposia, meetings, and conferences. We promote publication of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. We have a college internship program during the summer and a fellowship training program in strategic studies. You will be seeing our distinguished guest, Major General Shashi Bhushan Asthana. He is not a stranger to us. He has been on our platform several times before.
5 people.
And we invited him for this particular topic again.
It's an interesting topic.
I would advise our audience to kindly mute themselves because we are able to hear you. General Asthana is globally acknowledged Strategic and Security Analyst. He has a Ph.D. degree from JNU and has authored over 450 publications. He was a veteran Infantry General with 45 years of experience at national and varied international fields. He was former Director General of Infantry in Indian Army. He held key appointments in Army as well as in United Nations. He is Director of Courses at United Services Institution of India, the oldest think tank of India. He is a TV commentator, having participated in over 2,500 TV shows globally. He has been a speaker in various strategic and military forums, union organizations, think tanks, universities. So he is a public personality. He is currently on the Governing Security Council of Confederation of Educational Excellence, International Organization of Educational Development. He is a consultant on several international bodies. He has been awarded twice by President of India, twice by UN CE Excellence Award for National Building by Governor of Haryana, awarded International Diplomacy and Global Conflict Resolution, number of awards. So the question today is the Ukraine-Russia war, 2 years and beyond. It was exactly 2 years ago, on February 24th, 2022, when Russia, led by Vladimir Putin, started a special quote-unquote military operation. So as of today, the war enters the third year and situation remains dire. Despite Ukraine's resilience and Western support, the war endgame is still not certain. There are a lot of diplomatic efforts, but there's no lasting resolution or no lasting solution. As of today, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of European Commission, is in Kiev. So is Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, and Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of UK. We will discuss some of the issues regarding impact of this war on global politics. And there's no better person than Major General Asthana because he has spoken on this subject on our platform before. These are the colors of Ukraine. This is the map of Ukraine prior to the invasion. And these were the map of Ukraine with some separatist held areas. And of course, this is the situation now. A little bit about housekeeping. I would request everyone else to mute themselves to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone to vibration mode. Please do not interrupt the speaker. Only those members of audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to ask questions. No anonymous questioners, please. All the questions are moderated and have to be sent through chat function. Please do not send comments in the form of a monologue. This event is actually being live streamed on YouTube. So besides people who joined by this link, there are people who are on the YouTube, and it will be available in future on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, it's my great privilege to invite Major General Asthana to deliver his lecture. Major General Asthana, welcome please.
Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee, friends from Council of Strategic Affairs, ladies and gentlemen. It's a matter of honor for me to be speaking on the day of second anniversary of Russia-Ukraine war, which continues to be a devastating war on many counts with global implications. The war is still on in multiple domains, and the resolution is nowhere in sight, as was rightly mentioned. In next 35 to 40 minutes, I will endeavor to review as to what has happened in last 2 years, what is the outcome, what are the implications, and what do we see in future in 2024 and onwards. Now, this war is a war with varied perception. Perceptions of most of the people vary depending upon where they are located and how they are impacted by this war. We always find that all these perceptions, even if they are contradictory, they are right based on the experience of the person who is making that perception. Because these are based on as to how he or she is impacted and how their countries are impacted. So before I go further, I'll first flash few maps to make certain points which I'll be using later as I explain the conflict subsequently. So I'll first share my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Can you all see the screen now?
Yes.
Full screen. Okay. Now this is a map. It's a simple map, simple Google map. Now what I want to highlight here is, you see where is Russia, and if you see as to if Russia has to send its goods to Southern Europe, Africa, and Asia, the shortest route is via Black Sea. And via Black Sea means that Crimea is extremely important to Russia. Of course, Crimea is also part of Ukraine. And it is historically, I won't get into the history part of it, but strategically, you see the cruciality of Crimea for Russia and how the Black Sea impacts. Because if you see, if Russia has to transship its goods from this area, then the circuit is far too long and the cost is far too heavy. So this is something which is quite crucial to Russia. Secondly, if you see, this is this is Russia, so you can see the color, and this is the area of Kaliningrad. Now, when many in West or NATO say that if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, it will not stop there, then there are two connotations. One connotation is that Russia may like to join up with Kaliningrad. And that is how Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, they feel that they are threatened. And they are threatened certainly much more than other European countries. Similarly, when Russia makes a southern corridor, it has already taken Crimea. If it makes the southern corridor, this is the area of Moldova. And on Moldova, the edges of Moldova is the area of Transnistria. Transnistria is Russian-speaking people. There are certain Russian troops there. So the initial aim of Russia, if it was to combine Crimea with Donbas region and make a southern corridor, and then if he succeeds here, he can prolong the operation to get Odessa and then join up with Transnistria. So therefore, if it is looking at a lingual border, that is Russian speaking, joining all the Russian speaking people in this area, then this is the area which perhaps Russia could be looking from the geographical point of view. Now you see another, this is another map. Now this is giving the historic connects, let's say in 1991 as to how it was. I've already covered most of the points, but this is where the Kaliningrad is, and this is where the Ukraine is. Belarus is, as it is aligned with Russia. So basically, all these three states who joined later, they are the ones who are actually separating Kaliningrad with Russia, and are also, there is St. Petersburg is somewhere here. So this is the area from where it has got only one port. And if given a choice, as far as the maritime traffic of Russia is concerned, people can suspect that Russia could be looking little more territory this side. Now, this is a map which shows you as to how NATO was in 1990, when the promise was made by Baker that we will not move an inch eastward when USSR broke. And logically, Cold War 1.0 should have ended when the USSR got disintegrated and Russia came into being. But after that, if you see, now what is shown on the right side is the dark blue map as to how NATO exists today. Now this extension of NATO, from NATO's point of view, it can certainly say that all these countries have joined voluntarily. We have nothing to do with it. They wanted to join, and therefore they wanted collective security. They were threatened by Russia, so we allowed them to do it. The other connotation is not only by Russians or by others, even by, shall I say, by some of the American leaders also. Extension of NATO means that you have a captive audience where the Americans' arms could be sold. And this is a captive market. And logically, the collective security, and how do you convince people that they should join NATO? You have to hide the threat of Russia. Whether Russia is capable of that kind of threat or not, that is something which we will see later as I progress. But then the question is that certainly the expansion of NATO is in the interest of the arms lobby, and basically all these countries, whether it is Poland or Czechoslovakia or Hungary, all these were buying Russian equipment earlier till the time they joined NATO. Once they join NATO, their equipment profile has changed. And therefore the dependency and therefore the stability of the arm industry of United States and some other countries as well also takes some kind of security. And therefore it makes sense for people to grow eastwards, which has happened, which is right in front of you. The problem certainly came up when this eastward landed up in Ukraine, and where, as I mentioned very clearly, as to where the security of Russia is threatened to a much greater extent than it happened in all other cases. Now, this is a map of Nord Stream pipelines. Shown in green is Nord Stream 1 and shown in blue dots is Nord Stream 2. This is the area where the pipeline was sabotaged. Now, if you look at this area, till now, I think nobody has said who has done it. But then the fact is, initially, when we are in the age of information war, there were people who wanted the world to believe that Russia blew its own pipeline and Germany blew its own pipeline or something like that. Now, obviously, that is absurd. Because if you now see this location, there is no way that Sweden doesn't know, Denmark doesn't know, Poland doesn't know, Germany doesn't know what happened. If they have even little bit of maritime surveillance, there is no way that they don't know it. So people know what has happened. But then the fact was that at some point of time, if Nord Stream 2 had gone through, the European dependence on Russian oil and gas would have been so much that influence of America would have perhaps reduced. And therefore, at some point of time, Nord Stream 2 was not in the strategic interest of USA, as well as perhaps a couple of other countries, because too much of oil dependency and gas dependency of Europe on Russia was certainly increasing the influence of Russia in Europe. Now coming on to the way the conflict has moved in last 2 years. This was the map which Dr. Adityanjee also showed, the first one. This is before the war started. Now after that, you see that in this map, the second map, I'm on second map now. In this map is the way the war progressed in initial few months. In initial few months, what happened was that Russia thought that by encircling Kiev from all the three sides, having fair amount of mechanized columns threatening Kiev, maybe that the political leadership may give in, which didn't happen. Ukraine showed tremendous resolve and the consolidation did not happen. Half the media is certainly controlled by the West. So the story brought out was that they tried to capture Kiev and they failed. Let me tell you in no uncertain term that Kiev was never within the capability of Russia. If from 2014, if Russia was preparing for war, so was Ukraine. Because after Crimea was taken, there was no way that Ukraine was not preparing for war. Kiev is such a large built-up area. If the soldier strength of Ukraine was about 6 odd lakhs, everything put together or reservists put together, and Russians entered with 2 lakhs, there was no way that they would have captured the built-up area of Kiev. But then why did they come there? The reason was that their aim was to capture Donbas region, and Ukraine had built up fair amount of defenses against Donbas. So therefore, in military terms, we call it as turning movement, that you threaten a high value objective in depth and the defenses get turned and their forces from their original defenses, they start moving to protect certain other areas, whether it is Kharkiv or it is Kiev. So that is how these areas were threatened. What went wrong with Russians was that they started off with, they thought that it is a maneuver warfare. It was not, because it was built up area. They landed up with attrition warfare. They underestimated the resolve of Ukrainians. They also underestimated the resolve of the Western world, that is US-led NATO, that how far the Western world will go. The Western world did provide tremendous amount of material support, arsenal, as well as expertise to Ukrainians, and Russians bought tremendous amount of casualties. But in the bargain, the defenses were certainly turned, and Russia was able to make a fair amount of gains in Donbas region during that period. Now this accounts for the first year of war. Now we come to the second year of war. Having bought fair amount of casualties, Russia made a little bit of assessment, and that is where I will say that Russia learned from its own mistakes. They did a lot of mistakes. Their logistics was bad. They were short of infantry. They couldn't hold the built-up areas. So therefore, it made sense for them to move away from Kharkiv. They had to withdraw from Kharkiv, which obviously Ukraine can also claim that we fought so well that we recaptured Kharkiv. The area in blue is the area which they recaptured. And they also withdrew from Kherson. That is the other side of Kherson. Kherson is divided both sides of the river, the Dnieper River. It's on north as well as south. The southern portion is with Russia. The northern portion is with Ukraine. So what had happened was, if you are short of infantry, there is no way that you can hold on to a built-up area or a city, because the amount of insurgent attacks which will happen on you, you will not be able to sustain. And that too when your manpower is short. So it made better sense for Russia to pull back and continue and make a viable defense line, and this is what they did in the second year. So in the second year, they made a very strong defense line and did not pay too much heed on gaining ground. In fact, they lost fair amount of ground. And that was also the time when there was a fair amount of rhetoric from the Western side that, okay, Ukraine's counteroffensive, fair amount of arsenal was given, Zelensky was made hero, and thereafter, with all, shall I say, with all the announcements, the counteroffensive was launched, which failed. And the reason for failure are very simple. The Russian defense line was fairly strong. And secondly, in the built-up areas and the kind of terrain which we are talking about, anyone who is on the offensive, he will buy casualty. So when Russians were trying to cross Dnieper, their couple of battalions got wiped out actually. They had fair amount of casualties. The same thing was supposed to happen and did happen for Ukrainians also. When they started attacking across Dnieper River, they also lost a hell of a lot. So this is how the counteroffensive came to a grinding halt. And after that, both sides were actually resorting to the standoff attacks by missiles and drones and things like that. And they were just trying to destroy each other. And that is how a stalemate kind of situation continued. And in the meantime, what Russians did at a much faster rate than the West was that they built up their arsenal, they built up their manpower at a much faster rate than Ukrainians. And therefore, you would find that this is the status as of today, that they have been able to capture a fair amount of Donbas area, and they have got the southern corridor. They have been able to link up, and they have got 20% more territory of Ukraine after capture of Crimea than before 24th of February 2022. So this is how the situation stands as of now. This is the kind of defense line which I was talking about. That is how they had made a very solid defense line, and observing the terrain as to where they can. And this is the area which I am talking about, that Russians had gone the other side of the river. They found that this is a built-up area. This is that Kherson there, and they thought that it's not worth being there, and they fell back and they made a viable defense line and a strong one which they could defend. Okay, so this is where we are. They have already captured Avdiivka. They are moving westwards. now with Bakhmut, Avdika in their fold, this is the remaining portion of Donbass which they have to capture. And if they capture this area, this is the area of Transnistria which I was talking about. Sorry, I'll go back. This is the area of Transnistria which I was talking about. So after that, if they capture this area, then their aim plus is also achieved of landlocking Ukraine and joining up with Transnistria. And this is what Putin will try to aim for, that he gets the entire Donbass area, he gets this area, and once he gets that, then perhaps he will be reasonably secure in a manner that he would have created a fair amount of, his threat to Black Sea would have been removed, and he would have created a fair amount of buffer as far as the threat to Russia is concerned. Although everything has not gone in their favor. They had fair amount of reverses in the Black Sea fleet. So in the maritime domain, they haven't done too well. Similarly, while they were looking at not having a direct border with NATO, they have landed up with having a direct border in a manner that Finland has also joined NATO, and therefore you add another 1,000 plus kilometers of border with NATO. So this is how. Now this is the case of Avdiivka. This was the case a few days back, and now I think Avdiivka is totally with the Russians. And this is the case in the south. Now in the south, now that I am on the map, so I just want to explain it once. What Ukrainians were planning, the counteroffensive was planning that they put a thrust here and divide Russians into two, and they come straight to the area of Crimea. So the aim was that if they could pierce through this Russian defense line, and if they can hit Crimea straight, then they would have firstly divided into two. They also did a fair amount of what you see in blue, fair amount of insurgency here. And then it will be very difficult for Russia to sustain itself. But Russians also had read their mind, and therefore their defense line along this river Dnieper, was very strong. And now Russians are pushing in the area of Robotin as well. As far as Zaporizhia is concerned, the nuclear plant is with Russians, the town is with Ukrainians, that is the other side, and that is where we are. And as far as the implications are concerned, you can see a fair amount of people have fled Ukraine, and the kind of devastation which has taken place, I think that everybody knows. I need not talk about it because that's there in the news every day. But this is the kind of the human sufferings which have happened in Ukraine. So this is where we are now. I'll stop sharing the slide and get back to the talk. Now, as we see today, Russia is fairly emboldened by the success of Avdiivka. It is advancing westward of Avdiivka. It is also advancing, as I mentioned, in Robotin and other areas. And it has captured another area which is called as Pobeda. Now, the intent is that now Russians feel that they have the confidence and wherewithals to unlock the frozen conflict and perhaps gain a little more. And after 2 years, I think apparently Putin is also seems to be in its in his very strong, shall I say, position, whether it is politically or even he roved. He was in a aircraft that is nuclear capable aircraft or a bomber which was flying in high altitude to give a message to the West that all the rumors which you have been giving that Putin is not well, Putin is sick, etc., all this is nonsense. Because if I can be in such a high altitude area and being in that aircraft means that a person has to be really fit. It can't happen other way around. So therefore, all this has happened. But notwithstanding that, both sides have suffered fair amount of casualties. Both sides are struggling to recuperate their combat power. And both sides are counting their losses. Both sides have suffered financially. So there is a problem both ends, at both ends. Also, you can see the implications now in the West. Earlier, they used to say Putin must lose. Now this rhetoric has changed to Putin must not win. There is a subtle difference, but there is, in implication, there is a fair amount of difference. Similarly, earlier, President Joe Biden used to say, we will support Ukraine as long as it takes. Today, the wording is as long as we can. Now, obviously, there is a fatigue. There is a geopolitics has played in this in a manner that compulsions have also increased, engagements have also increased, and therefore there is a very heavy toll of domestic load also on all the countries who are supporting Ukraine. So it's understandable that this is the kind of problems which are happening in a long conflict. People initially may have thought that the conflict is short, but I think Russians were quite clear in their mind, and all the strategists were quite clear in their mind that it's a long conflict. It can't be short in a manner, because if there are so many built-up areas, there is no way that you can clear those built-up areas in a short span. So it had to be long, and the problem now is, which perhaps the West did not understand, that yes, you can be proxy, you can give all kinds of support, you can give money, you can give arsenal, you can give ammunition, you can do what you want. But then the soldiers, nobody else can give. And it is this number of soldiers which will matter. If the size of Russia is, population of Russia is thrice the size, and if you have a very strong leader and they can muster more combat power on ground, then at some point of time, maybe the numbers may prove to be a game changer. So this is another area which we need to look at. Now, there are certain hard realities which nobody can forget as far as this particular campaign is concerned. And the hard reality is Russia has the largest arsenal of nuclear weapon, and therefore NATO cannot afford to threaten survival of Russia, and therefore will like to avoid a direct confrontation with Russia by any stretch of imagination. There is no way that US will risk annihilation of New York or Washington to save Zelensky or Poland. Let's be quite clear on that. Similarly, Europe has no choice. They did not prepare for their defense. They will have to follow what USA says, because having gone so far, they have to now follow the collective security regime, and which is led by USA. So if USA wants the war to continue, it will continue, and Europe will have to fall in line. Similarly, it is also a fact, and I think Pentagon has said it sufficiently, that Ukraine will not be able to recapture the entire territory. The geography of Ukraine will change forever, and unless NATO puts its troops on ground, now that indirectly amounts to Third World War or nuclear Armageddon. So I don't think that situation will come, nor is Putin very keen on such a going so far. So both sides will certainly shy away from that. There's no doubt that the kinetic contact and hybrid war is between Russia and Ukraine, but it is a big power contestation, and therefore US-led NATO is also into undeclared, non-kinetic, non-contact warfare, which is in economic domain, information domain, diplomatic domain, and political domain. And they keep fighting with that. Like today you see, after fall of Avdiivka, and now that the second year is on, USA has announced 500 more entities being sanctioned. Now, sanctions have not made too much of difference earlier. There's not very much hope that it will make any major difference, but certainly it's a good optics because there is a frustration and there are lack of options on the Western side to what to do. Similarly, they've latched on to Navalny's death also as an information warfare, because 2 years back Zelensky was made hero, today Naval, this guy is a hero, or his wife is a hero, to bring a democratization of Russia. But let me tell you, because all the news of the Western side is not available to everybody, and we certainly do get certain news from Russia as well. Let me tell you in no uncertain terms, Navalny was no threat to Putin. His approval ratings are just about 3 to 5% as compared to 60 to 70% of Putin. Also, there are a lot of question marks on the narratives of poisoning and things like that, because Putin was in jail. He was given a parole to go to Germany when he wanted to get treated, because his family wanted him to be treated not in Russia but in Germany. So that's how he moved there. And subsequently, in some, I think, gathering, Putin was asked that did you poison Navalny or something? He said, had I done it, he wouldn't have been alive by any stretch of imagination, and he wouldn't have gone for treatment unless it had his approval. So that's the way things are. But notwithstanding that, it's a good propaganda, or as well as, shall I say, a rallying point for the West, because agendas are required for a successful information war, and this is one of the major agenda which can be used. Now, as far as Russian aim and strategy is concerned, Russian aim I have already mentioned, that it is to capture Donbass area and get that corridor. I think I have explained on the map, so I won't go into too much of it. But what Russians have miscalculated is the Ukrainians, the arsenal which has been given to the Ukrainians. There is also a fair amount of expertise given to Ukrainians, which are in fact they are in fact the factory workers, or shall I say the contractors, so-called contractors, but they understand as to how to use that equipment, and therefore their strikes in the Black Sea have been very successful, and therefore Russia has certainly given up, or shall I say, has lost a fair amount of fleet in Black Sea, and that will remain a concern for Putin too. What is working in favor of Russia is that Russia manufacturing of the military arsenal has been 400% in these 2 years, as compared to Europe, which has hiked only 20%. So therefore, you can very well see as to who has got a bigger surge capability and who has got a bigger resilience. And therefore, for Putin, it will make sense to prolong the war as much as he can, and maybe that in 1 year, he may try to achieve whatever I have just explained on the map. As far as Ukraine is concerned, as I said, that they were also prepared for the war from 2014. And when the war started, they knew that there is an asymmetry of assets, especially the air assets and air defense. So what they did was, they did use, made good use of the built-up areas, converted towns into fortresses, and maybe buildings into pillboxes. And whenever there were strikes on them, they could use that for information warfare purposes also. But notwithstanding that, it did cause fair amount of, and the kind of drones which they have got, the HIMARS which they got from America, it did cause fair amount of casualties. And with a good military use of the built-up areas and terrain friction, Ukraine could stand and has done well to stand for last 2 years. And they could impose a war of attrition on Russia, thereby causing fair amount of casualties to Russia. Now I am given to understand that again Zelensky is talking about another counter-offensive. We will have to see as to whether he is really in a position to do that or otherwise, because not very many would give him that kind of chances to perhaps progress that. Now, as far as US-led NATO is concerned, we knew that I have explained the interest of United States earlier, but now United States and US-led NATO is in a position that they cannot escape this war, because unless they bring Ukraine to a position that there can be some kind of reasonable negotiation, they will find it very difficult to avoid the loss of face. So therefore, they will have to progress it. Now, whether we like it or not, the fact is, even if their military aid is stuck in U.S. Congress, but it will come tomorrow or day after. It will come certainly whenever it has to come. But what is not recuperable for Ukraine is the manpower. So basically, it's going to be this manpower issue is going to make a big difference in 2024 in favor of Russia. That's what I feel. As far as global impact is concerned, certainly the whole world is suffering economically. Energy, food prices have gone up, and US has got entangled in Cold War 1.0 and 2.0 together. That is in the Indo-Pacific, in addition to other engagements like Israel, Hamas, and things like that. The biggest problem, which perhaps with this kind of, shall I say, initiative, which has come up, is that there is a second bloc which has appeared, which comprises of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, whereas Iran and North Korea are supposed to be helping Ukraine militarily as well, and China is only helping out economically as well as giving dual trade items. But notwithstanding that, it has actually put United States in a little awkward position for a simple reason, because they do not have the capacity to deal with all of them together. And therefore, you will find that in number of cases, a fair amount of compromises are being made on China whenever we talk of, whenever China does something, there are instances where US is soft or chooses to look the other side. As far as the future is concerned, as I said, as of now, the things are stacked up in favor of Russia, at least in 2024, unless some other game changer comes up in the horizon. Putin is almost certain to win the next election, unless some miracle happens. And Ukraine is struggling for weapons as well as for other arsenal, as I mentioned. And there are a lot of countries who have announced security pact with Ukraine. But that is an optics for the simple reason, because no NATO country can violate Article 5. And everybody knows that if you put your soldiers in Ukraine, then it is a war on NATO. And I think everybody would like to avoid that. So it's more of optics, or maybe trying to give military aid individually. The countries are giving individually to Ukraine as well. Apparently, Putin has also made up his mind in some manner or the other that maybe that the area which I mentioned, he would like to capture that, leave the rest of Ukraine, because he has no capability. I don't think Russia has a residual capability to capture the western portion of Ukraine. And capturing further west is certainly out of question. That threat is hyped as far as for special purpose. But I do feel that what Putin would be looking at, I don't think he will mind the Western Ukraine being part of EU. He will certainly mind Ukraine joining NATO. That I think he will resist in some manner or the other. And that is how I see the situation will pan out. Even Putin, he has said at times that I would like to go in for talks, but he would like to grab a little more territory, at least clear the entire Donbass region before he really goes for talk. So I think I'll end here, and I think I'm open to question and answers. And with the informed audience, as we have in Council of Strategic Affairs, I'll do my best to answer that. And I have tried to be as objective of this campaign as I could, as it is possible. But certainly, everybody has his own opinion, and everybody is entitled to his own opinion.
Thank you.
So I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Major General Asthana, for very lucid, very objective analysis of this situation. Before we come to questions from audience, I would, as a moderator, make some comments and try to clarify certain issues. But it was a pleasure to hear you, sir. This is not the first time you have spoken on this topic, and we deliberately invited you because you have been on our platform discussing about this particular topics in various formats, whether distinguished lecture or roundtable discussion or whatever. So idea was to bring it on the anniversary of this war and get an objective analysis from a military perspective rather than ideological perspectives. So one clarification I want to make, you use certain Hindi terms to denote the numbers, which is lakhs. For our audience, which I based in United States, they don't understand. So 1 lakh is 100,000. So when you say 6 lakhs versus 2 lakhs, it is 600,000 versus 200,000. So that is something our listeners sitting in United States need to understand. One clarification, you started by saying that Crimea is part of Ukraine. Actually, if you look at the Soviet Union, Crimea was part of Russian Federation till 1954, when then General Secretary Khrushchev, who happened to be Ukrainian, transferred it to Ukraine. So there is a historical reason why Russian Federation reoccupied Ukraine, because they felt that during the Soviet time an injustice was done to them. Crimea was originally a Tatar and Turkish possession taken over by Russian Federation, and it was part of Russian Federation till 1954. So that is a historical clarification.
Yes, I totally agree with you. That was slip of tongue. In fact, when I was explaining, so basically it was more of indication at that point of time. But yes, well, the fact which you have said is absolutely right. There's no doubt about it.
Whether this war started on February 24, 2022, or in 2014, or immediately after dissolution of the Soviet Union is debatable. Because all said and done, from an objective perspective, Europe historically has had a penchant for wars. And these are white tribal European wars. And you have been seeing that, whether it was World War I, World War II, they started as tribal European wars. And after dissolution of Soviet Union, there were wars in Europe. A country by name Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was broken down by force. A country by name Serbia was dismembered, and a part of that country called Kosovo was turned into a new country. So the war has not stopped after dissolution of Soviet Union. And that's why you are seeing the current war, because they are causally related. Any comments on that?
Okay. As far as continuation of Cold War 1.0 is concerned, you rightly mentioned it never ended and it continued. And the design with which the war in Central Europe continued, and even after that, the one you mentioned, and even after that, we had been having that Armenia-Azerbaijan war. That has also continued. It didn't stop there. Similarly, the posturing of Turkey on Greece, that has also not stopped. So therefore, there have been certain inner conflicts. There is no doubt about it. But what had happened is, why this becomes special is for two reasons. One is that Russia is the largest nuclear power, and a war involving Russia has a different connotation. in terms of the sensitivities, in terms of the escalation by it or accidental triggers. So therefore, this was a sensitive issue, pushing NATO right on the doors of Putin. That was, I think, stretching it too much. In fact, many in United States itself has said, why did you have to bark on the door of Putin? Because after 2 years of war, I think any sane man will say, I think it was much better if Ukraine would have remained neutral. The whole world would have been much more peaceful, number one. And Europe would have been much more peaceful. Now you see two things. When Zelensky says that I am fighting for my sovereignty. Now, my simple question is, today, can he make any decision without asking United States? So where is his sovereignty of decision? Secondly, if he says that I am fighting for democracy, for 18 months from the time the war has started, it is under martial law. And he has no intention of getting the elections conducted because he knows he is going to lose. The day Western aid stops, after that, political survival of Zelensky is very difficult. So, therefore, and there is no guarantee that NATO will include him, because one of the clauses of NATO is that the country involved should not be, the country concerned should not be involved in internal and external conflict, because then it amounts to the entire NATO getting into war straight away, if you include him. Now, there is no way I can think of that Ukraine will not be involved in external or internal conflict, because external conflict it is involved now. Even if this one gets resolved by in whatever manner, insurgency will continue there. There will be even in the Russian occupied territory, the Ukrainians will make sure, and the amount of mercenaries which have been pushed into this war, they will make sure that this happens. Also, I am taking a cue from whatever you said. Europe is not going to be any more peaceful hereafter. The amount of mercenaries which have been put into this war, at some point of time, they will get back. And also, whenever somebody gets used to the weapon, after that, he doesn't like to work in factories. He wants to make money out of the weapon only. So we have seen it in other areas also, that this is something where there will be a problem. The refugees who have gone outside, the whole lot of them in Europe, many of them will not like to get back, and Europe will have to perhaps manage with them. So there is as you said, you rightly said, one conflict leads to another, and in the bargain, it's a chain reaction, and it makes the region unstable. So I agree, whatever you said, that those conflicts related to Kosovo, and there are pinpricks even now. It's not that they are all settled. They all have problems. They all have internal problems. Even if you can whitewash by saying that, okay, your blue map of NATO has increased a fair amount, covered almost most of the Europe. But then the fact is that there are internal fissures as well. So I agree with you.
The second observation I would make is in terms of West's perception that it is just Putin's war. And if we can take care of Putin, this war or conflict will disappear. There's a very strong Russian faction, which is hyper-nationalistic Russian population, that believes that Soviet Union dissolution was an assault on the Russian psyche. And these people, led by Putin, want to recapture all the territories of the Soviet Empire. If you look at possible successors of Putin, Dmitry Medvedev, in fact, he is much more hawkish than Putin. So do you see resolution of this conflict if Putin is allowed to take part of the Ukraine, the eastern part of Ukraine, to have secure borders? Or Putin or his future successors will continue the war and try to get Baltic republics and other republics that were part of Soviet Union?
There are two things. One, firstly, commenting on what you said initially, your statement. There is no doubt that it is the entire Russia is backing Putin. There are very few people who don't, who have some other views, but certainly Putin is very popular and the cause is very popular. Secondly, as uh, the US-led NATO put a whole lot of sanctions and confiscated their funds and things like that, a super nationalist view has emerged in Russia, and Putin represents that strong man, that he is the guy who can get us everything. And therefore, Putin's popularity, there is no question. As of today, if you see, amongst all his opponents, I think Putin emerges as the strongest leader. And therefore, to anybody to say that if you remove Putin, firstly, he won't be removed so easily because it's not all that easy. And secondly, the shall I say, emotions and the conviction of Russians is going to remain the same. There is no doubt about it. Now, as far as the expansion is concerned, here there can be a little contradiction in a manner that Putin also did not launch an operation till the time. I think there was fair amount of time. He gave some kind of security plan. He gave there was fair amount of negotiations carried out before that, but everything was rejected by the West. That's what Putin claims. Secondly, he actually got alarmed by two things. One is that Zelensky passed a decree that we will reoccupy Crimea. This happened somewhere around in 2021. And immediately after that, United States and Ukraine, they did an exercise in Black Sea. Now that is what alarmed Putin. And knowing Putin what he is, there were two options. One is you let things happen in Ukraine, in Crimea, and then react. Or two is that you preempt an operation. So knowing him, he preempted the operation. He chose the first option. As far as the other states are concerned, that is other Eastern European states, whether it is Latvia or Poland or other, I don't think Putin is in a mood to get involved directly with NATO. Because it doesn't suit the interest of Putin as well as Russia, economic interest as well as all other interests. There is no doubt that yes, there is a emotional feeling and a rhetoric to regain the territory. But then that emotional feeling also has to be backed by practicality. And Putin has not done things which are not practical, because there are certain things. Yes, he has bought a lot of casualties, and his army also has to learn a lesson on that. There is no doubt about it. But then the fact is, why did he choose only Ukraine? And even today, if you see, when Finland joined NATO, he didn't show too much of reaction, although it's a direct border with him, because of the Black Sea problem, as I mentioned. Because with Finland, that problem is not there. So he doesn't feel threatened by Finland. So he is not that much concerned. So the practicality is, it is not, if it is not in NATO's interest to pick up a war with a nuclear armed Russian state, it is also not in the interest of Russia to pick up fight with NATO. So I think Putin will stop short of actually picking up war with NATO. Similarly, his Kaliningrad, yes, it is isolated, but nobody has threatened it so far. I don't think anybody ever threatened it. So I don't think there is an insecurity with Putin to expand more. The only thing is that to expand NATO, the Russian threat had to be hyped. And it is a fair amount of media creation, because you see, when a lot of people say that, okay, he doesn't, he's very secretive in what he does. I don't think so. There was an interview every year he gives of 4.5 hours, where anybody and everybody in Russia can ask a question to him. And I have seen his interviews, and he answers everything. And so therefore I visualize that since strategically it doesn't make sense to pick up fight with NATO, he will stop short of that. That's what is my view. I mean, everyone can have different view on that.
You very well mentioned about the mercenaries being involved in this war, and that will have long-term consequence for Europe, because these mercenaries, when they go back to their countries, they probably are very hardened combatants, and they will do some problems. As we see at this point in time, mercenaries are on both the sides. They are definitely mercenaries from all over the world in Ukraine, but there are mercenaries in Russian side also. Russia is willing to give citizenship to anyone who will come and join the Russian army.
Yeah.
Russia fraudulently took 15,000 citizens of Nepal as quote unquote security assistants who were supposed to be doing some, not combat duties, but other helping things. But they've been made to fight, and Nepalese government has actually made a representation to Russian government. And similarly, there are some citizens of African countries that are actually fighting on the Russian side. So any comments on that?
Yes, see, using mercenaries is a new trend, and it has happening both ways. Russia has been using it for very long. It's not new. They have used them in Africa as well. Wagner Group is one such group, and there are many more other groups as well. In fact, there is an author in United States, Sean McFate. He says mercenaries will arrive, and mercenaries will be fighting, because it makes sense for very many people to have paid fighters. So therefore, it is something which is going to happen. This is not the first time we are seeing. This is also not the last time. You will find paid fighters being used at many places. We also have certain cases of paid fighting in our neighborhood as well. So therefore, this trend of mercenaries is going to remain. There are certain pros and there are certain cons. How to manage them? I think Europe, as of now, doesn't have too much of experience. Russia has tremendous amount of experience. Normally, they have used mercenaries outside Russia. Normally, they have used them very successfully in Africa, and even in this Ukraine war, their use of mercenaries has been quite successful. Similarly, as far as paid fighters are concerned, the kind of unemployment which exists, whether it is Nepal or it is some other countries, there are few Indians also, I am told, who have gone there and who started fighting, and now, or they were made to fight. They were recruited for something else, and they were fighting, and I think we are trying to get them back as well. So there have been, so people do look for job, and there are also certain fraudulent agencies who hire these people for a particular job, and thereafter there is some amount of lurement. Now, what exactly happens with everybody, with the man, only the man can answer as to why really he agreed to fight. Same is the case with the IS also. But then the fact is that mercenaries are there to stay. They will be used. They have been used earlier. Historically also, there is a fair amount of historical record that mercenaries were used in the earlier wars also. So I think the third columnist, the mercenaries, the insurgents, the disgruntled elements being picked up. This is also a new element of warfare in the Cold War, as well as in the Hot War. Even in the Cold War, there is a new thing which I must share with everybody. Uh, that earlier we used to say that, okay, you send certain terrorists or paid terrorists, you kill they kill few guys in a country and the country is alarmed. Then they find that uh, there is a more effective method of alarming a country, that you create social unrest. All democratic countries will have certain disgruntled elements with certain disgruntled agenda. And if you can muster them, pay them, and create unrest in the target countries, it can be even more effective. So these are the kinds of new domains of warfare which are opening up. And certainly mercenaries is a new domain which is likely to stay.
So I'm going to go over to the chat room. There are some opinions/questions. So I will start with the first one. It is from Dr. Shrikant Chopra. Russia is a major power which is trying to dismember a much smaller nation. Why are the Indian policymakers pro-Russia and anti-Ukraine? Friendship with Russia does not mean accepting Russian aggression.
I think this is a comment. I agree that this is not an era of war. I'm just repeating what the Prime Minister had said, Prime Minister of India has said, that being a partner of Russia does not mean accepting the violation of territorial integrity of somebody else. And therefore, I think war, everybody is against the war. And I think we all agree on that the war must stop. And people must perhaps understand as to what is happening. Logically, the war should not have started. So it was an avoidable war. Had all it required was, even I believe I am given to understand, then when the Arab leaders went to Russia to ask as to why don't you talk, why shouldn't the war stop? I think he showed some paper to say that Zelensky had agreed and signed somewhere in March for talks, and that was the time Boris Johnson landed up in Ukraine, and that proposal went out of the window. There is no doubt that there are certain strategic and economical reasons for many countries for the war to continue. And Zelensky, the way he has been propped up, he actually had no major choice but to continue if USA wants to continue. So that is where perhaps there are certain external factors in this war which are ensuring that it doesn't end. Certainly, there are, if Russia was provoked, the converse is also true. Russia was also a guarantor of Ukraine's integrity along with UK and USA, and they signed a paper on that. Therefore, and when the nuclear weapons were being withdrawn, although they were not Russian nuclear weapons, they were all Russian nuclear weapons, but some were located in Ukraine. But when they were being withdrawn, they were told that your integrity will never be touched. But then reverse happened. So therefore, it's not that nobody is a holy cow in this game. Both sides are to be blamed, and sooner both sides see that peace is important, I think better it is for the entire world.
So there is a very interesting question from Ambassador Kapoor. After the conclusion of this war, how do you see Russia's position globally vis-a-vis China?
This war has pushed Russia as a second partner to China. Earlier, we certainly see weaker position of Russia and over dependence of Russia on China, because even once the war is over, apparently Russia will have to look for the Chinese market. Its oil exports will be overly dependent on Chinese consumption and perhaps Indian consumption. So basically, what this war has done is it has made Russia to look the other side, that is towards the Asian side, as far as its exports are concerned, because Europe is determined to cut it down. That's one part of it. Secondly, as far as the economic dependency on China is concerned, it has become very heavy. With lesser friends and with Russia overly sanctioned, there are pros and cons of actually pushing Russia into so many sanctions because the West has now ensured that Russia and China are together, which Kissinger at some point of time had pointed out, that never deal with these two Asian giants together. If you have to destroy them, then destroy one by one and not both of them together. So this is a very awkward combination, which because of mixing up of Cold War 1.0 and 2.0 by President Joe Biden, this situation has come up. So it has become a junior partner. It is now the hips are joined. Although Chinese are smarter, they are not going to join military effort with Russia. They are very clear because Chinese know that their market lies in USA and their market lies in Europe. And one thing which Chinese cannot compromise on, they may compromise on anything, but not on their market. So that is why you would find that China has never militarily supported. And I have been to all these countries. I've been to China as well as Russia. The sense I was getting in China was that China is not too happy with prolongation of this war. Apparently, because most of the think tanks were of the view that it must end. It's enough is enough. So apparently, China will certainly like to dominate. And the other implication which I found, which was quite interesting, was China was trying to tell CAR countries, that is Central Asian Republic countries, that I am the one who is now going to look after you. Russia doesn't have the capacity, and therefore you guys better follow me now. And therefore there is going to be a little bit of clash. This clash was already there on the influence on CAR. There was a clash between Russia and China, but now that clash is Russia has compromised to a great extent in favor of China. So this is a compromise which perhaps Russia has made to some extent.
So the next question is again from Ambassador Kapoor. How come the population of Ukraine, which has undergone so much of devastation, is not rebelling in a significant way against Zelensky?
There are two reasons. The first reason is that as it is, firstly, there is martial law. So that's one part of it. The second reason is that non-Russians certainly see it as see Russia as a threat. And the previous allegations of Russia that Russians were treated badly means that there was some kind of racial discrimination. And therefore, there is a very significant set of people or segment of people, mostly in the Western Ukraine, which who feel that Russia must not win. And therefore, we must do everything which we can. The recruitment of Ukrainians to a great extent is by force. If you see the Ukrainian regulations, nobody of the required age can move out without government's permission outside the borders of Ukraine. So there is a problem there, and martial law has been put purely for this reason, that there is no dissent. Otherwise, there is no reason the way people have been sacked in Ukraine. There is no. This is an element of. You can smell the dissent there, but it is not coming out in open. People are being sacked. Also, in my opinion, people who want the war to prolong, they have played it quite smartly. The hierarchy has the news of corruption is already there. The hierarchy has perhaps been given a fair amount of assurance in terms of money and material or money or real estate, that if things go wrong, you will have a good time, don't worry. And you first follow the narrative which you are supposed to follow. So apparently that is where the things are. As far as people are concerned, it, even in Pakistan, people are disgruntled, but things don't happen in that manner. So as of now, Zelensky is a martial law dictator, and we would have seen whether the protests are there or not if there was democracy. As of now, democracy is not there, so the question of protest doesn't arise.
Now, talking about democracy, a lot of water has flown down the river. But if you remember, the president by name Viktor Yanukovych, who was toppled by a so-called Maidan Revolution, which was inspired by an official of a major superpower whose telephone conversations were taped and got leaked. So that Maidan Revolution, toppled a president who was duly elected in a democracy. And there was no need to topple him. You just wait for the next electoral cycle and let the elections happen. Ukraine has always been a kind of, divided nation with the eastern part Russian speaking, Russian ancestry, and the western part more, Ukrainian speaking. And if you see the successive presidential elections, Viktor Yanukovych was losing elections earlier. And in, I think, around 2009, he won the election. And the eastern part heavily voted for Viktor Yanukovych. So when you mess with the democracy by external influence, by using money or, engineering rebellion in a democracy, you see the results. Any comments?
No, I agree. In a democracy, the protests and rebellions is a part of democracy, and that is why Chinese, when they justify to their public as to why the kind of system they have, they give this example that democracies are chaotic, and therefore the rate of progress cannot be what we have achieved. So don't talk of democracy. And in fact, what they say is that we have a different kind of democracy. It is a one-party democracy, but it is a democracy. Anybody can say anything. But actually, we all know what kind of democracy China has. So it's not that. But yes, you are right. In democracy, rebellions are there, protests are there, sometimes genuine, sometimes perceived, sometimes propagated. But then no government and no country in this world is perfect. Everybody has some disgruntled elements and will continue to be so. How those disgruntled elements are galvanized, whether by insider or by outsider, that will perhaps determine and how much hold the leader has. It's not that against Putin there was no protests. Wagner group did try it out, but then they did not succeed. And in fact, the day it happened, even that day on television, I had said that Prigozhin is not going to live much. That was very clear. But as of now, nothing will happen to him for the simple reason because there is bloodbath is not required on Russian street. That is the last thing which can be agreed. So as of now, I think it will be peacefully dealt with, and subsequently he will be dealt with separately. So this is how that is Russians' way of managing it. Chinese way of managing is slightly different. They have disgruntlement in Xinjiang, tremendous amount of it. And they have done all kinds of atrocities. They have done all kinds of even genetic profiling and a whole lot of atrocities, concentration camps, etc., etc. There was something called as a strategy of three evils. They have done everything. But then the beauty is that out of 51 Muslim countries, not a single country has ever questioned them.
Well,
And
I think that's a different question. Let me come.
Yeah, okay. I think we'll leave it at that for some other day.
There's a comment, Switzerland was formed by a group of mercenaries 520 years back, so there's always a risk to hire them.
Yes, I totally agree with the point which has been made.
Yes. I think we have run out of questions from the audience, so I'll just make one comment. There has been some hostility towards Russian Federation as continuation of Cold War mentality in certain US policy establishments without realizing who is the real strategic adversary. And there are different approaches between a Democrat administration versus a Republican administration. One cannot imagine if from 2020 to 2024 there was a Republican administration, would this war have been there? But there is certainly a perception that there's a failure to understand the geopolitics and continue to perceive Russia as the main enemy. Whereas at this point in time, the main strategic threat to the United States is coming from China. And sooner the US policy planners understand that. Actually, Russia understands it very well. They are in a state of learned helplessness, that they have been lapped into China's arms because of this war. Left to themselves, they have grave security threat from China, not just in Central Asian region, but also in the Siberia. China is encouraging migration of Han Chinese people into Siberian region of Russia. And they have every intention to absorb that into greater China or the ever expanding Chinese empire. So Russia knows that China has expansionist design on their territory also, not just influence in Central Asia. Sooner the US policy planners understand this and tackle the real enemy, you would not have wars in Europe. So with those comments, we are going to try to bring this lecture to a conclusion. My heartfelt thanks to Major General Shashi Bhushan Asthana, who has been on our platform a number of times, and everyone enjoyed your brilliant, incisive, objective analysis. And we also enjoyed the question and answer sessions. And we hope that you will continue to come on our platform. Thank you very much, Major General Asthana.
Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee, and thank you all the viewers and all the friends from Council of Strategic Affairs and all the viewers who are watching the show. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
I will also thank our audience. And lastly, I will thank Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachauri, Mr. Rajiv Verma, who helped me run these programs. Without their help, these programs are not possible. So I'm thankful to Team CSA. And with those acknowledgements, we are closing this session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, sir.